if you want your team to be doing that deep thinking, if you want them to be spending dedicated time, it's got to be earmarked. You got to set it aside because it's not going to happen in the 5 minutes between conference room reservations or like between calls. It's just, there's not enough room for it. I get that it's hard to make a case, when there's so many things you could be spending budget on, but I don't think people ever regret investing in development of the team. The better your team is, the better your outcomes are.
Welcome to Content Kingdom. This is your backstage pass to the people, tools, and the trends shaping the future of content marketing.
Welcome to Content Kingdom. I'm your host, David G. Ewing, and we're here for a special episode in the wild, and it's about to get diesel, and that is Melanie Deziel. So Melanie is hanging out with me here at Content Marketing World 2025 in the Agency Lounge, which is totally, I'm saying, styling.
I think so. Yeah, we get some sweet chairs.
Yeah, this is great. And she's a tremendous thought leader in the world of building trust with content and is here to educate all of us about how we take it to the next level. So, Melanie, thank you for being on Content Kingdom.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun to get to meet up at an event like this, too. We're surrounded by our people, which is really cool.
Yeah. So, Melanie, I'm sure you've thought a lot about what your message is and your key points are for this conference. And you've been here like one or two times, right? Like just a couple, maybe 8 times.
It's been quite a few. Yeah. So this is, I love this event. It's such a great event for content marketers. And I've been speaking here since I think 2016 or 17. So it's been a journey. It's a family for sure. And this time it's a unique experience for me. So usually I do either like a workshop or a breakout, or I do the keynote if I'm lucky enough to get chosen for the big stage. This year I have to do both. So I had a big 3-hour workshop yesterday where we talked about how to come up with content ideas, like a system for building out an entire strategy. We have so many channels to program. How do you keep things fresh? How do you find something new to say? So that was a lot of fun. And then this afternoon, I'll be part of the breakout keynote stage, and I'll be talking about creativity and fostering a culture of creativity in your organization.
Wow, those are both things I struggle with personally. I sat there on Sunday before I came to the conference, and it was my day to plan out my content for the next 30 to 60 days, and I just sat there with the blank page, and I suffered. I really suffered. I was just kind of like lost as to where I'm going to go. So can you help a guy out? Like, what are a couple of key points from that talk that I should be thinking about when I'm thinking about what to do to plan out my content and come up with some original ideas?
So a lot of what I talked about yesterday in the workshop is from my book, The Content Field Framework. And I call myself a creative systems architect. Like most of what I'm doing is figuring out how do we fix the systems that fuel our creativity? Because that's really where you get, that's where you get benefits. That's where things start to improve, if we're not just winging it every time and waiting for a blank page, right? So when it's coming up with content ideas, the best system I like to remind people is that a content idea is actually 2 things. It is the focus, what are you going to talk about, and the format, how are you going to bring that to life?
Okay.
And most often when we get stuck, it's because we start with format instead of focus. We're so worried about, I need a video idea, I need a blog idea, I need a podcast idea, that we limit ourselves and it becomes difficult to fill in the blank. And I like to give the example of when you get a package from Amazon and the package is gargantuan and there's like a tiny pack of batteries in there. Yeah, right. And you're like, definitely they picked the package before they figured out what was going inside, right? So we can do the same thing with our audience where it's like, I have this big box, I don't know what to put in it, and I'm like struggling and I'm coming up with filler, and you kind of run into that same scenario. So if you start with, what do I want to say? What do I want to talk about? Am I talking about the history of this thing? Am I talking about the people who are involved with this thing? Am I going to look at the numbers of this particular topic? Then you figure out what's the best way to bring that story to life. That usually helps kind of get some of those blocks out of the way.
Well, you definitely hit the nail on the head, because when I sat there Sunday, I was thinking, I need something for the newsletter. Newsletter's been a little light lately. It needs to be a heavy hitter. And I want to talk about AI.
just a gigantic, huge topic.
Just like a giant cargo container that I would like to put in a little box for everybody. And so, those are some good analogies. Okay. So what's the next step after somebody's figured out kind of their content? When do they choose a format?
I always say that the format choice has to come afterneath. It has to come after or beneath in terms of importance. It has to come after you figure out the focus. But there can be a delay. Like sometimes the reality is you still need something for the newsletter. So you can't just delay that forever. But you want to have that focus first. Sometimes it's immediately after where you say, okay, I have this idea. Now, how do I bring that to life in the newsletter, right? Figuring out how do you adapt it to fit that box you need to check. But it can also, I mean, you can just have a plethora of ideas that could come to life in many different ways. And then when you sit down and say, I need a newsletter idea, let me look through the focuses I've already figured out, the topics I already have, and then adapt them there. So you can, I mean, you can put some distance between when you're thinking of both things. But I think so often we're forced to do it the other way around when it's like the newsletter's tomorrow, I got to do something, you know, and you're kind of like under the wire.
Yep.
And that's when your creativity stalls because there's just not enough room to think.
Got it. So are you a big believer in starting early?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course. Well, I mean, look, I think I try really hard to be radically transparent and say that I know that I'm talking about strategy that is in an ideal world.
Yes.
And the reality is all of us have a lot on our plates, right? You may not have the size of the team that you want to have to execute all your big ideas. Like, so yes, in an ideal world, we start early, we have a good backlog, you know, you have stuff you can draw on. Maybe you have some drafts ready to roll in case, you know, life intervenes and you don't have time to do what you need to do, right? But we're all operating in less than ideal conditions. That's just the reality of being human, you know?
Yes. And just to admit fully, because I don't know why, but I'm in a confessional mode today. But like, I'm the guy who before Amazon had 2-day shipping was at the mall on December 23rd, you know, buying presents for everybody that is supposedly my loved ones. And like, yet they're the last priority here on the 23rd. So, and that just is kind of how my life goes. So, all right. So could you give me a tip on what do I do to not be the procrastinator that I am when it comes to my content?
You know, I think we need to do some like, you know, maybe some content therapy, figure out what those blocks are, like what's holding you up.
All right.
But I have found that if we're thinking of content like an obligation, it's something we put off. If we think of it as best we can as an opportunity, it becomes a lot more exciting.
Okay.
So instead of thinking like, oh, I have to come up with these ideas for this, you know, for the weekly post or whatever, it's like, what if I could tell my audience anything right now? If I could help them understand something, if I could teach them something, like it's this opportunity, what would I tell them? What would I teach them? What would I share with them or show them behind the scenes? It becomes a little more fun because you're seeing it as a possibility instead of a, you know, an obligation. It's kind of a framing thing, but I find that it makes a big difference if you think like, I have a chance to teach my audience something this week. Like, what am I going to teach them? That's more exciting to me.
You know, a light bulb just came on for me because this summer I took my family up to Pennsylvania and I thought for fun I'd play with Substack.
Yeah.
And so I made a private Substack for just the family. And every night I would just write the funny things that happened that day, some inside jokes, stuff like that. And I did it just about 2, 3, maybe 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And I put together 50,000 words on the stupid summer.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an obligation. And I never realized, because I've been asking myself all fall, why is it that I was able to do 50,000 words on just jokes with my family?
Yeah.
But it was an opportunity.
It was an opportunity.
Not an obligation.
And think about like, what was the opportunity that was exciting? You wanted to memorialize things, right? You wanted to not forget things. You wanted to create memories. Like you lean into those things that it's an opportunity to do.
Yeah.
And for me, I consider myself an educator, and a lot of the work that I do, whether I'm writing books or doing workshops, is like I'm helping people do their job better. That's my goal, right?
Yeah.
I want to make your job easier. I want to make your content better. I want your business to do better. And so for me, that takes away a lot of the stress and the pressure. Is like I'm showing up in service. Like how can I help? What can I teach? How can I, you know, help them feel less stressed about work? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that like service mindset makes it feel more like the opportunity, right? Where you're like, my role here is not to like complete the tri-weekly posts to document it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I want to capture these memories. I want to, you know, hold on to this moment, you know, when we get back home to the craziness, you know? So yeah, I think that mindset shift is just like, this is actually an insane opportunity. We get to talk to our audience every Wednesday during our newsletter or every Friday on our posts, you know, like, what could we teach them today? What could we help them with, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So you did the big workshop yesterday.
Yep.
And what was the feedback from the workshop? What did people like and what did they have questions about?
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, this is good because we were just talking about this like way of service. At the start of my big workshops, and this was a big one, a 3-hour one, I go around and I ask anyone who wants to volunteer, like, what's your business? Like, what are you here to create content about? And what do you want to get out of this? Because I see it like my job's not to get through all these slides. My job is for you to walk out fulfilled with whatever that purpose is you came here for.
Yeah.
And so throughout the workshop, I will then refer back and say, so, I'm teaching them a concept and then say, so for you, where you're doing the biochemical engineering, here's how that might apply to you. And for you, the supplement company, here's what that looks like for your strategy. And so that, I think, is what people find the most valuable, is like they're seeing not just the concept, but the application, right? Like not just a hypothetical, but like this is what that looks like for your business. And I think seeing it like tangibly makes it easier to understand how it applies to your business.
Got it. Now, you've been going diesel on this conference for eight plus years,
Yeah.
right? Have you done a workshop like this in the past?
I haven't done a workshop like this in the past. So the workshop yesterday, the conference has like that pre-day, like the day you register ahead of time, right?
Exactly,
so it's like these deep
the
dive
bonus
workshops,
day, that's,
right?
yeah, which is a great thing that conferences are doing now.
Totally,
I love that.
Yeah. And it was great. But a 3-hour workshop's pretty intense. I haven't done, this is I think the first, well, maybe not the first year, but it's the first year I've had the opportunity to do one of these like really long workshops. But I thought it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of interaction, a lot of like activities, people actually walking out with a notebook full of things they can take action on, super tactical. So I really like that. I mean, I love a breakout session. I love, 45 minutes to try to just teach as much as I can, but the audience interaction and the ability to like apply it in the room, I think is so, so valuable.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And what I was interested in is I think a lot of people, they procrastinate on content, not just me, but other people, because they may not be convinced of where the benefit comes from. Where's the ROI? And so I was wondering if you could share some stories of maybe some people you've helped in the past or anything around what have they done that then turned into content that justified that time, so that if someone's right now listening to this podcast and they're saying, I have to justify to my boss why I need a day to go to the diesel workshop, what is that justification? What is really the power there?
I think there's something to be said for getting out of your day-to-day element and getting permission to focus on strategy. We are all doing our absolute best. Our teams are doing their absolute best. But like we talked about before, we're working in less than ideal conditions. We're busy. We're stressed. You're juggling a lot of different responsibilities. We're managing fires as they appear. So what I find is when I'm working with people in a workshop environment, whether that's like a conference or like an employee offsite or like an annual sales meeting, right? Those environments where people have explicitly said, like, I can set my inbox aside for a little while. I can be proactive instead of reactive. I can really spend some dedicated time, deep thinking about how we can improve and grow. I think it's that permission is really the most important. And so if you want your team to be doing that deep thinking, if you want them to be spending dedicated time, it's got to be earmarked. You got to set it aside, because it's not going to happen in the 5 minutes between conference room reservations or like between, calls. It's just, there's not enough room for it, But I mean, it is, I get that it's hard to make a case, when there's so many things you could be spending budget on, but I don't think people ever regret investing in development of the team. Right. That's always a good investment. The better your team is, the better your outcomes are.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about is, you've written 2 books, and I want to talk about your second book because I'm definitely interested in the trust and prove it. But how did you do it? Like, I'm actually interested, like, you hear about some authors who, they have rules like, I have my rear in the chair, and like, it's like, what's your method for getting that type of content? Because writing a book is no simple feat.
No, it's not. I will say I have a slight advantage. I came to marketing by way of journalism.
Okay.
So writing has always been, I call it my first content language. Everyone has a way of expressing themselves that comes most naturally. Like sometimes people love to speak or they like to write,
they
whatever.
Like to podcast.
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have always been a writer. That's always been my preferred way to express myself. And so the writing itself wasn't difficult. I think what was difficult was having a clear structure before I started. And that made all the difference in the world. I think a lot of people sit down to write a book and they're like, today I will write book. Like they just kind of, there's no more plan beyond that, right? And so for me, before I wrote this book, I didn't come up with any of the content. I was just documenting it. I had been doing workshops and testing stuff and writing it in blog posts to see how people reacted. So it was more like compiling than anything. By the time I sat down, I knew these are the chapters, these are the topics I'm going to cover. So it was actually just the mechanical work of putting it down onto paper rather than having to sit there and think of what the book was about, if that makes sense. So
yeah, makes sense.
I really advocate for, especially a project of any size, but a book especially, you got to break it down into smaller parts and have really clear structure on what you're going out. So maybe this is like a little too telling. So I'm autistic. I think in systems. I think in pictures. So for my book, I had a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet had each chapter. And I knew that I needed an intro for the chapter. I needed a closing for each chapter. I needed an example. I needed data to back it up. I needed an expert quote. And so I had that checklist to say, once I have those elements, I'm ready for the chapter. If I'm missing an example here or an expert here, I know what my next action item is to come up with the example or to find the expert. So breaking it down into like its smallest elements allowed me to do it really quickly. My first book, I compiled in about, I would say 4 or 5 months. It was about 35,000 words, not a huge one. But I will say I also had a child due a month after my manuscript was due. So that was a really good incentive to get it done on time. Because I knew
a deadline.
It wouldn't happen otherwise. So yeah, if you could give yourself like an artificial, important deadline, that helps too. Because otherwise you just go on forever.
Okay. I have never heard of the idea of using a spreadsheet to write a book, but I am in love with that idea.
Yeah.
That is great.
Because a book, it really is. It's a huge thing, but
It's a huge
made up
project.
of small parts,
Yeah.
right? Each chapter is going to need those same things, and it depends on the structure of your book. Some are a little more freeform, but you need those same elements, especially if you're writing like a nonfiction book, right?
Yeah.
You need the data to back things up. You want to talk to experts. There's some common elements that appear. And so it's so much easier to assemble those pieces and put the puzzle together rather than trying to figure out what the picture is and what the pieces are as you're doing it.
Yeah. No, you just brought a tremendous amount of clarity to that. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. All right. So let's dive into your book, Prove It. Tell us about that, because gaining trust is the name of the game, especially in this world of AI where no one trusts the content. They're saying, I don't trust the content I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Although you're real, right?
I'm real.
Yeah. Okay. So we're both real. So let's get real. So
Yeah.
how tell us about Prove It.
So Prove It is a book I created in collaboration with Phil Jones, who's an amazing sales speaker. And the two of us, we were friends, and we just kind of found ourselves talking, I wish that the sales folks knew this side of what you're doing in marketing and vice versa. And so we kind of tried to combine, our expertise on this one. And the idea was, we are all operating in the most skeptical consumer environment that has ever existed, right? People don't believe anything they see, everything from AI to like fake news and propaganda and misinformation. Like there's lots to be skeptical of. We don't blame them for that. You can see it as a problem that no one trusts anything we say,
right?
Or as an opportunity. There are so few people providing enough proof of the things that they say, and we can be one of the people who do. So that's really what we're advocating for, is like every time you are communicating with your audience, remind yourself they will not trust this unless there is proof. And so that becomes like the onus that you have to put on yourself as a marketer, as a communicator. How am I showing that I'm not just saying these things and that they are actually true? And that mindset shift, I find, is really freeing, but it's also really telling. You realize how much as a marketer you're just throwing out adjectives. We're the best, we're the fastest, we're the whatever. It's common practice, but it's no longer enough. We really need to provide additional context for that.
Yes, puffery, hyperbole. There's all kinds of words for what that is.
Yeah.
So give me an example of how someone might use proof in something innocuous, like a social media post. Like how could I use proof in a social media post?
So what kind of social post? What are you posting about?
My usual schedule is Mondays, I try to post something inspirational about leadership.
Okay.
Tuesdays, I post about the podcast.
Okay.
Wednesdays are usually about Content Lion, my software company.
Yep.
Thursdays are back to being about podcast, and Fridays are about my other company, Motive. So my general.
Let's go with
MO.
the podcast one.
All right.
Let's say you're trying to post, you want people to download, to listen, to subscribe, or to leave a review, right?
Yeah.
Now, every person who has a podcast believes that their podcast is worth listening to. Right.
Well,
Or they
in
wouldn't
my
make
case,
it.
it happens to be true. But
Right.
because
But
you're
yes.
on it,
But what I mean is every person who posts about their podcast is going to say, my podcast is
Of
awesome. You should
course,
listen to it, right?
It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yes.
So how do we push it a step beyond to say, how can I show that this is not just me saying my podcast is awesome, come listen to it? Like, your audience isn't your mom. They don't care about that,
Yeah.
So how do we bring an additional layer there? And that might be using testimonials, right? Bringing testimonials in to say, look, you don't have to take my word for it. Like, check out these people that you know and trust who said that this is worth their time, right? You can look at, you can point to data and talk about how many people have downloaded, how many listeners you have, how long you've been around, how many episodes you have, and point to like legacy and experience. I don't want to use myself as an example because that feels really weird, but you could put to whoever your guest is and talk about the awards that they may have won or the accomplishments that they have, to say, I'm telling you it's an awesome guest, but decide for yourself. Like, they've done this work with these companies, they've won these awards, they've been doing this however long. Like, you can find ways to back up the claim that it's an awesome episode and an awesome show beyond just saying it.
All right, I have a request for you then.
Oh, God.
No, this is easy. I'm going to say the bit of hyperbole. I'm going to look into the camera and be like, my podcast is awesome.
Yep.
And then you could give a testimonial for Content Kingdom, and then we'll make that a clip, and then we'll see if this actually works. Ready?
All right.
All right. My podcast, Content Kingdom, is awesome.
Content Kingdom is a must listen for people who want to improve their team's performance, who want to improve the marketing that they're doing. And you'll find industry leading experts from major Fortune 100 companies who come on and share their expertise with you to help you uniquely improve the work that you're doing on your team.
I think Melanie just built some trust.
So that's on the spot, but
There we go.
That's the kind of stuff we're talking about.
That's
right?
wonderful.
It's
That's
like,
wonderful.
how do we go beyond great or worth listening to and bring some other element, ideally not our own, right?
Mhm.
Like, pulling on other people's trust, speaking to our legacy, speaking to the consistency. Like, you see all the time people say, join 12,000 other people who joined our newsletter, right?
Yep.
That's social proof. That's going
Right.
to give me, better than join my newsletter. It's cool, Yep.
Yep. So yeah, okay. So we bring that evidence, we bring the trust.
Yep.
You can read more about it in your book.
Mhm.
You're speaking this afternoon, right?
I
So
am.
you're also a keynote speaker. Tell us a little bit about today's topic. What are you keyed up about?
So this afternoon is really interesting, and as a speaker, it's a fun challenge. So you typically have pretty standard time slots that you work with, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. It's pretty standard. We're trying something new, which is there are 6 of us, and we are each taking 10 minutes, and we are handing off topic to topic to topic in between. So we're doing 1 hour with 6 sort of TED-style talks mixed
Beautiful.
in. So it's a really fun challenge as a speaker. This is going to be, I've never done a 10-minute speech before, right?
And do you know where you are in the order?
I am second. Yep.
You're second.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
I've worked with the first person to make sure their ending flows into my beginning, and then the person
Nice.
after me, it will flow nicely as well. I'm talking about creativity. And so I'm supposed to give my sort of best advice for having a creative team in 10 minutes. So essentially what I'm doing, again, back to systems thinking, I'm breaking down creativity and creative operations into its 2 key parts to say, you actually need these 2 elements in this specific order, and that's how you end up having a more creative team.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And then you're handing it off.
Handing it off to Tamsin Webster, who is a storytelling expert, has written multiple books, really great at message design and brand positioning.
I love this format. I think this is going to be a really cool talk.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know that you've got to get ready for this, so I don't want to keep you any
Yeah.
longer than I have to, but I just got one last follow-up question, which is,
Sure.
in terms of how people can work with you, if they want help with creativity, if they want help
Yeah.
with trust, what's the best way to interact with you?
Yeah, so I work with both individuals and organizations. So it really just depends on the need. When I'm working with organizations, I tend to do things like workshops, employee trainings, and that can be on how to generate content ideas in a systematic way, or content operations, improving your documentation, improving your processes to make the entire content creation process smoother and more efficient. When I'm working with individuals, it's a little bit different. Same general principle, but applying in a different content. So oftentimes it's thought leaders, experts, executives, authors, coaches who say, I have all these ideas, I don't know how to make sense of them. And how can I turn those ideas into a talk, into a book, into a course, really finding the structure that's underneath their main ideas. And so I call it framework acceleration. So I work with people on creating their own proprietary framework or system that they can then use to kind of build a brand around. So to me, it's all the same work, right? I'm just helping people make sense of their ideas and then make their ideas make sense.
Okay.
But yeah, individuals or groups, it just depends on what kind of help they need most.
All right. And where does our audience go to find you?
Well, the good news is, if you spell my name even remotely right, I'm very, very findable. So there's not another Melanie Deziel out there for you to find. So
Nice.
Melanie Deziel, if you search for me on your network of choice, I spend most time on LinkedIn and TikTok lately, which
Okay.
was surprising even to me, but I'm
Ooh.
enjoying it. And my website is melaniedeziel.com. That's where you can find information about bringing me in as a speaker. You can find information about the books or all my social links as well.
All right. Well, we're going to do a French goodbye because the TikTok thing, I got to ask one more question then because I was going to wrap this up. But talk to us about your experience in TikTok, because actually my producer and I, we're discussing this. We're not doing enough on TikTok.
Yeah.
And so tell me about your TikTok journey real quick, and then I promise I will let you go.
My TikTok journey, you have no idea what you've just requested, because it has nothing to do with marketing.
Okay.
And it's unexpected and hilarious, and I'm having the best time.
Oh, great.
So I tried using TikTok for marketing, and it wasn't sitting with, like, it wasn't clicking.
Wasn't resonating.
It wasn't working quite for
Yep.
me, for the audience. It was like, this just feels a little forced. I'm not the lip syncing, dancing type. You know,
Okay.
this isn't going to do it for me. And so I was just sort of enjoying it as a consumer, right?
Okay.
I have a hobby having nothing to do with marketing. I enjoy making miniature dioramas. So like mini
cool.
scenes, like the kind that might be a background in like a stop motion or something, but just for fun, like a secret hobby in my garage that I never post about. A friend of mine was like, this is really good and you need to post it. Like, the creative community will appreciate it. So I did the thing where I posted about it, like, someone's telling me I have to share my artwork. So here you go, guys. And I expected no one to see it. And 150,000 people saw it. And I got thousands of followers overnight, and I got really overwhelmed. And so now I have a TikTok community and following of miniature artists, totally separate from any of my marketing stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. But it's fun. It's good to have like a creative outlet where I don't have to have my marketing hat on all the time. And honestly, it's been a challenge to not strategize it to the point where it's not fun anymore.
Got it.
You know?
Well, it's an opportunity. Somebody wise just told me that.
That's right.
But no, that's great. And, we'll have to talk about 3D printing some other time, some other place.
I don't have a 3D printer, but
I am a big 3D printer guy. So,
oh man, I'm going to start you're going to be printing like mini books, mini shelves.
Well, we got to go. But yes, to be continued. And maybe I'll start a TikTok on 3D printing.
Yes.
So, all right. So thank you all for another episode of Content Kingdom in the Wild. Here we go. And thank you, Melanie, for being a great guest.
Thanks for having me and letting me share my story.
All right, let's go Diesel.